Power chords are an essential part of any guitar player's development, and they can be found in most styles of music. However, there are some simple tricks that people miss with them, or they don't realise how easy they are to add. We're going to look at how these classic chords can be transformed with some small changes. Let's start by building a basic power chord. We're going to start on the 3rd fret. We're going to build a C power chord, also known as a C5. We take the first note of C, which is found on our 3rd fret of the A string with our 1st finger. Our 3rd finger comes across to the 5th fret of the D. This is where our G note is found. G is the 5th note of the C major scale, C, D, E, F, G. And then we reinforce that C note by adding C again on the 5th fret of the G. And that is an octave above the C note that is found with our 1st finger. Same note, octave apart. And then that 5th sits in between. A power chord. Lovely, sounds great, does what it says on the tin. If you need more help understanding these power chords, I've got a video all about them linked up here. We can move the root from the A string up to our E string. We'd now be playing a G5. Same principle, 3 fret distance between those 3 fingers that we're using. We're on the 3rd and the 5th fret, E, A and D string. Now once you've got this shape, you can create a major or a minor chord pretty easy. We're playing our C5 power chord. We can lay our 3rd finger flat and bring in this E note. That's the 3rd note of C major. C, E and G form a C major chord. Brings a little bit more life and clarity to that chord, eh? If you're a fan of Nirvana, you will see Kurt Cobain playing this shape a hell of a lot. Now some people will bring in that E note to make it a C major, like this. Personally, I've always preferred that shape, and our 2nd finger can just sit in between them, resting. It's not making any difference to the sound that we're creating. We want to make that a minor chord. That 2nd finger does come into play now. It goes on the fret in between our 1st and 3rd fingers. Our little finger is sitting under our 3rd, like it was in our initial power chord shape, and our 2nd finger comes in to the 4th fret of the B. We flattened that E note that was making the major chord to an E flat or a D sharp. We're working backwards, so we'll call it an E flat. We've now got C minor. That chord has been transformed into major, minor. If we was to do that with the low E as the root, we start with our G. To add our major element, that 2nd finger that's just laying dormant at the moment comes into play on that 4th fret again. It will always be the fret in between the 1st and 3rd finger. Wherever you are on the fretboard, it's playing that G. We have our major chord. Don't worry about your 1st finger bringing out the B and the E string yet. That's when you're starting to form a bar chord, which is a great trick to have. I also have a video on that if you want to check it out. It takes a lot more strength with that 1st finger. If you've got it in your locker, brilliant, add it. If not, don't worry. Just let your 1st finger bring out the root, the low E, and it just curves over that B and E string, so they're just muted. We want to make a minor. This is where the 1st finger does do a bit more work. 2nd finger comes off. Our 1st finger now pulls out that G string, 3rd fret. That's where our minor note exists. And that principle is applicable all the way up and down the fretboard. The power chord shape, the major shape, and the minor shape. The same with the low E. Minor. Lovely, you've unlocked the whole fretboard. Now let's look at a first tip which I love within these chords. Let's go back to that minor shape. So let's form the C minor that we just worked on. We can get to a major shape from here, not the C major, but a D sharp major, just by moving that 1 finger. We play our minor shape, we move our little finger across to the 6th fret of the A string. We've now got a D sharp major. I love this shape. And I love that the power chord, the initial power chord that's evolved, can now link us to this in a really smooth way. If you just looked at that shape as a starting point, you'd think that looks pretty complicated. But we've gradually got there by forming this minor shape, and we now only need to use 1 finger to get there. Bit of a stretch, but it's a beautiful shape to play. If you can lay that 1st finger flat as well and pull out the high E string, adds a little bit more sparkle to it. And as you might have noticed, that is just the C major shape moved up the fretboard. And our first finger comes into play to compensate for the open notes that exist in the first position. We would usually be playing with our first, second, third finger. We are playing with our second, third and fourth. As we shift up, our first finger comes down to eradicate those open notes and allow us to move this shape all the way up the fretboard. Let's stay here. We've landed with our root note on the 10th fret. It's a G. I can just move that back into E minor. And another beautiful thing about these two chords is they're relative. They're the relative minor and relative major of each other. For those that don't know, relative majors and minors share exactly the same notes. They're a different key, but they share the same notes. There's a different starting point. So a major chord, like G major, its relative minor, the key that shares exactly the same notes, is E minor. If we was playing F, our root note here with our little finger is playing F, F major, the relative minor of F is D minor. Wherever you go on the fretboard, those two chord shapes are going to link and work beautifully. So you're always going to have a lovely combination, and remember those chromatic abilities. These shapes can be shifted up and down the fretboard. I'm always looking to pass on tips like this, and my free beginner guitar course is exactly the same. You can get your access with the link in the description, totally free of charge. So if you fancy checking that out, please check the link below. Let's take these chords a bit further and turn them into sevenths. We've taken a power chord to make it a major or a minor. We can now add the 7th note of that scale to add even more interest and intrigue to this chord. It's evolving even more. To make that a C major 7, our second finger is now playing the 4th fret of the G. Our third finger stays where it is, playing that 5th, and our little finger had already come in to make the major note. So rather than laying that third finger flat or doing it like that, we can put it like this. Chromatic possibilities all the way up and down the fretboard. If you want to lay that first finger flat, if you've got the strength, pull out that high note as well. We have C major 7. The minor 7 comes from, we've done the minor shape, we know that now. Take your little finger off, rely on your first finger to lay flat across that 3rd fret, pull out that G. Rather than just a minor chord, we have a minor 7. Let's work in the key of C and play a combination of major 7ths and minor 7ths. Let's hear the difference if that was just major and minor. Add the 7. Let's do a combination, some 7ths, some just standard. Suddenly you can have the same chord progression, but those small little differences will just give it a little bit more life and a little bit more intrigue for the listener. Let's do another really simple trick. Let's bring in some open strings. We have our power chord. We bring the 3rd and 4th finger on a little bit more of a curve, particularly the 1st finger. We allow those open strings, the B and E, to ring through. If we was to maybe do that as the 7th, lift that 1st finger up slightly. Really nice. We're just doubling up the E note there. I like it. And those open strings, the B or the E, sound lovely in certain positions. It sounds nice on the lower strings in certain places as well. Doesn't always sound that lovely, but there will be times that it works really nice, so experiment with that. While we're in the lower range, we're utilising the lower E string. Let's expand to a bar chord for a minute. So we play our G major, we use our 1st finger to apply that pressure to make it a bar chord. Now that pressure can be tricky for people. And you hear about how important bar chords are, and I agree, because it opens up the fretboard. Again, it's a great shape for that, chromatic abilities. But if that's a bit of a struggle, or we just want a bit of a different vibe, bring your first finger down to the B string, bring your thumb over the top. In essence, we have the same chord. We've made a slight difference. Instead of the root note being here, with the low E, playing a G note, the G exists here as well. We've replaced that bass note with another note from this chord, but it's D. D can be found here, and we are also putting it here in the bass. G, B, and D make up a G major chord. G, B, and D. We've added D to the bass. We are now playing G over D. We're playing a G major chord over a D bass note. You will sometimes see these referred to as slash chords. I've done a much more detailed video of this chord shape and how much I love it and the options it gives you. So that's worth checking out as well. So G over D. And we can just move that. If we want to bring the minor element in, we just bring our first finger back up to that 3rd fret, 2nd finger comes off. Remember we had this as our minor shape. Our first finger laying flat, pulled out that G string. Well, here, it's got less work to do, but the same job is taking place. Chromatic possibilities and combinations of both. Major, minor, major, minor. See how this shape has been able to continually evolve. Let's add one more possibility. Let's go back to those 7ths. Do a D minor. D minor 7. This little finger is just hanging around. We understand why it's come off. We had our D minor shape. We've gone into a D minor 7. Let's put that little finger to work. It can start to move around those other frets that are available. And maybe we'll add some little hammer-ons as well. Into that C major 7, that little finger can start to come off and move around again. Maybe hammering all of that shape back on. It's a nice way to start the chord. Don't be too confined to the shape, whatever shape it is that you're learning. Round the corner, there is always another little option available. So start to explore and experiment with that. And are there any other variations that you particularly like to add to your chords? Let me know in the comments. Now that you've looked at these chords in a ton of detail, you're going to want some classic tracks to try them out in. So check this video next for 5 must-know power chord songs. Big thank you for watching. I'll hopefully catch you in another video soon. Take care.